Hello, and thank you for that introduction. Um, I'd like to thank the Society as well for the invitation to speak to you tonight. As an early career researcher, it's great to be able to give a paper at such a prestigious society. So, the Knights Templar are among the best known elements of medieval period. They were the first of the military religious orders and important players in the Crusades, and their dramatic end as accused heretics has since spawned endless conspiracy theories. The Templars, or groups inspired by them, have repeatedly featured in films, novels, comics, and video games, but this fame has also led to darker appropriations. Today, both the US and the UK are home to groups that imitate these medieval knights, pledging to fight a new crusade against multiculturalism or cultural Marxism or a new world order and other buzzwords of the far right. Tonight I'll be discussing how and why the far right have appropriated the memory of the Knights Templar for their own ends, and the role that pseudo-histories and myths about the Templars can play as an entry point for this and other dark historical revisionisms. I'll begin with a brief overview of medieval Templars before moving on to the history of the far right's appropriation of the Crusades and the military orders. The Templars arose in the aftermath of the First Crusade, which saw 4 new Christian states established in the Levant at the end of the 11th century, states that were desperately short of manpower to defend themselves. Hugh de Péan and Godfrey de Saint-Omer, 2 knights from northern France, banded together with several other knights to help defend pilgrims visiting the holy places. They would combine the religious vows of a monk with the military role of a knight, living lives of poverty, chastity and obedience, but also serving in war. This group was formally constituted in 1120 and then received papal approval in 1129 as the Order of the Temple of Solomon of Jerusalem, better known as the Knights Templar. The order quickly grew, gaining support across Europe, receiving lands and estates there to fund their campaigns in the east. By the end of the 12th century, the Brethren had holdings throughout Western and Central Europe, and had begun to become important landlords and political figures in their respective kingdoms. Other military orders, like the Hospitallers and Teutonic Knights, soon emerged as well. The Templars continued to grow in power in the 1200s, even as the Crusader states themselves declined. When the mainland finally fell in 1291, the order's headquarters moved to Cyprus. Had the order survived, they probably would have become a naval power as the Hospitallers did. However, whatever chance at recovery the Templars had ended in 1307. The Templar Grand Master Jacques de Molay was in Europe to discuss plans for a new crusade, and at dawn on the 13th of October, Philip IV of France had all the Templars in his kingdom arrested. The order was falsely accused of heresy, though Philip was probably more interested in acquiring the Templars' wealth. The papacy soon took over the trials, which rumbled on for 3 years. In 1312, the Council of Vienne ruled that the order had to be dissolved, and in 1314, Jacques de Molay, who had recanted his confession, was burnt at the stake. The Templar leadership was now gone, and its surviving members were sent to live out the rest of their lives in monasteries across Europe. As an organisation, the Order of the Temple was over, but this dramatic end ensured that the fame of the Templars would last for centuries. The far right's use of the Crusades has a long history, though the memory of the Templars and other military orders was only used occasionally before the late 20th century. The second Ku Klux Klan, founded in 1915, and the third Klan that emerged in the Civil Rights era, both referred to Knights or Crusades, such as this poem from a Klan paper, which we can see tries to present the Klan as acting in the spirit of medieval crusaders. But the Klan rarely mentioned the military orders specifically. Hiram Evans, Imperial Wizard of the Klan from 1922 to 1939, did once give a speech to fellow members presenting the group as a successor to secret orders of chivalry that he said were founded in the Dark Ages and aimed to combat autocrats. and this may be a reference to the military orders. In Europe, the fascist movements of the 20th century also made use of crusade imagery. Francisco Franco and his supporters often cited the Crusades both during and after the Spanish Civil War, such as in this poster. And here is a mural from the Valley of the Fallen, a complex established by Franco to commemorate the Civil War dead. The piece is called Crusaders of the 20th Century, and Franco is shown here at the centre of the piece in the armour of a knight. He and his rebels also made some use of the military orders. There were many Spanish medieval military orders, and here in this poster we can see one of them being referenced. This shield here, the third one in, bears the sword cross of the Knights of Santiago. The propaganda of the Nazis and their puppet states also drew upon the Crusades. Here we can see a Slovak poster depicting Germany and its allies as modern crusaders. Next we have a poster from occupied France with a crusader whose silhouette is that of a German soldier. The Nazis also made extensive use of one of the military orders, though it was not the Templars, but the Teutonic Knights which they drew upon. The history of the Teutonic Knights, a German military order that played an important role in Christianising the Baltic and establishing German colonies there, provided what the Nazis saw as a historical precedent for their drive to the east. Ironically, the Nazis were no friends of the contemporary Teutonic order, banning it in Austria and in Czechoslovakia. But despite this hostility, the Nazis continued to use the order's medieval history in their propaganda and thought. Hitler's Mein Kampf said that Germany must march along the road of the Knight Brothers again. Heinrich Himmler also spoke of emulating the Teutonic Order, saying in 1939 that he wanted to take what he saw as being good about the order, which he described as bravery, outrageous loyalty to an ideal which we admire, adaptability, riding off into the distance, riding off towards the east. Here we can see a poster from the Nazi organisation Bund Deutsche Osten, with a map of the Baltic lands once held by the Teutonic Knights, and the BDO's logo, a black cross on a white field, much like the Teutonic Order's cross, but with a swastika above it. This appropriation was not limited just to posters. On the 21st of May 1940, a procession of German soldiers carried several replica flags of the Teutonic Order to the castle of Malbork, the Order's former headquarters in Nazi-occupied Poland. The flags had been held at Krakow and were supposed to represent those that the Polish-Lithuanian forces had captured when they defeated the Teutonic Order at the Battle of Tannenberg in 1410. A Nazi Party newspaper reported that when the flags were handed over to the Reichsgovernor at Malbork, he said, "The battle of nations of the last 500 years will be brought to a conclusion with the complete Germanization of this country." But despite this long history of the far right's appropriation of the Crusades and some of the military orders, it has only been in the last few decades that the Templars have become a major target of far right appropriation. It's important to note here that there is often little distinction made in far right imagery between a Templar and a Crusader. While the Templars were not technically Crusaders themselves, as they did not swear a crusade vow, the image of a Templar knight, a man in a white mantle with a red cross, has become the standard image of a Crusader and is very easy to find the same image described as a Templar in one place and a Crusader in another. In the UK, Templars frequently appear in far-right memes and imagery. Even the logo of the anti-Islam English Defence League is derived from a Templar battle flag, which is also half black, half white, though here they have added a red cross to it. The group has also been known to dress up as Templars at demonstrations. The political appropriation of the Templars is not limited to the UK. In 2011, Norwegian terrorist Anders Behring Breivik claimed to be a Justiciar Knight Commander of a revived Knights Templar order, and another far-right terrorist, Brenton Tarrant, claimed to have contacted this group. In Spain, supporters of the far-right Vox party often make use of Templar imagery, as we can see here. And in Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro's supporters frequently cite the Templars and the Crusades. A group called the Knights Templar of Brazil, which describes itself as a religious, paramasonic and traditional organisation based on the Knights of the Middle Ages, even endorsed Bolsonaro for the 2018 presidential election. This political use of the Templars can also be found in America. During Donald Trump's presidency, many online memes cast him as a modern-day Templar. In this image, we see the photos of Trump, Viktor Orban of Hungary, Vladimir Putin and Nigel Farage photoshopped onto a still from the Swedish film Knights Templar. Trump's supporters also used this imagery in marches and rallies. So at the top left, we have an image from December 2020 when the far-right Proud Boys group marched in Washington, D.C. And amongst the various far-right imagery that was there on that day is a Templar flag. And the other three images are taken from the Capitol riot on the 6th of January 2021. And you can see Templar imagery and a Deus Vult flag and other Crusade imagery. The far right has not only used the imagery or name of the Templars. In the last decade, multiple groups have been founded that even intend to imitate this medieval order. The Ordo Catholicus Militaris, Catholic military order, is a private military corporation based in Montana. It was founded in summer 2016 by Alexis Bugnolo, a self-styled Franciscan friar. You can see an image of him here. And it claims to follow in the footsteps of medieval military orders like the Knights Templar by providing charity to their fellow Christians and fighting in their defence. The OMC seeks to establish footholds across the world, provide humanitarian relief, and, as the website puts it, take up arms to defend fellow Christians when and where necessary, just as Blessed Urban II preached at Claremont 921 years ago. The OMC makes frequent use of the memory of medieval military orders, the Templars in particular. An essay on its website entitled The Justice of Our Cause briefly discusses the medieval orders and claims that the OMC is just the latest incarnation of this tradition, one that it says has been established and defined and defended by the Catholic Church for more than 900 years. On the OMC's website, the group's rule, the regulations governing life within this organisation, is placed alongside an image from a manuscript copy of the medieval Templar rule, and is itself heavily inspired by this text, even going so far as to replicate much of the wording. The focus of these two rules are also similar, including prohibitions on brethren in antagonising each other, the requirement for daily mass, and that new members should be received before a chapter of brethren and have the entire rule read aloud to them before joining the order. The OMC has even produced a novel to promote its ideas. At 39,000 words, this book, On Becoming Soldiers of the Cross Again, is the most extensive example of the OMC's infatuation with the Crusades and the Templars. This bizarre novel, written by the host of the Order's radio show, follows the adventures of 7 Catholic American soldiers in Iraq fighting to defend Mosul against ISIS and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. With the help of the ghost of Polish King Jan Sobieski III, electric trebuchets, and a revived corps of Polish winged hussars, the soldiers defeat the jihadis. The reforms of Vatican II are overturned, Pope Francis and all of what the author calls evil clergy are killed by a green spirit sent by God, and Pope Benedict XVI comes out of retirement to restore the Holy Roman Empire following the collapse of the European Union. The soldiers, mortally wounded in their final battle defending Mosul, spend their remaining days praying, building a monastery, marrying, fathering children, and then finally dying as martyrs. The prose is intercut with several images of medieval events, figures and saints linked with the Crusades, including Pope Urban II, Bernard of Clairvaux, St James Matamoros, a praying Templar, and the 1291 Siege of Acre. Over the course of the novel, the soldiers experience visions of Bernard of Clairvaux, one of the Templars' earliest and strongest supporters, and all 7 of them are revealed to be descended from the original members of the Knights Templar. The largest imitation Templar order on the far right is the Knights Templar Order International. This British organisation, founded by Jim Dowson, co-founder of Britain First, emerged in 2015. Its membership also includes Nick Griffin, former leader of the BNP. The order claims to be a fraternity of over 3,000 men and women, and markets itself as the spiritual descendants of the medieval Templars and inspired by that order's ideals, their rule, and by Bernard of Clairvaux's De Laude Novae Militiae, of the tract that he wrote in support of the Templars. The organisation's website also includes a brief history of the medieval Templars. The order's aims supposedly include publicising Templar heritage and opposing the Islamisation of Christendom. They call for an end to the West's rift with Russia, armed resistance against Islamists in defence of Christendom, the unification of all Christians, and cooperation with secular Muslim governments. In practice, this appears to have amounted to little more than working alongside and outfitting anti-refugee paramilitaries in Hungary and Bulgaria. The group's imagery is wholly taken from that of the Templars. Their flag is the same black and white field, though they have added a red cross, and their regalia, as we saw in the previous image, is the same white mantle with a red cross. Upon joining the order, new members receive several items, including a cross pendant inscribed with Militia Templi, a Templar flag, and a copy of their Templar oath. This last item is almost an exact copy of the Knight's Oath in the 2005 film Kingdom of Heaven, ironically a film in which the Knights Templar are depicted as villains, bigots, and fanatics. The group even has an online armoury selling replica medieval weapons and armour, including Lionheart swords and Lionheart daggers blessed by ordained priests. All of these products are supposedly produced according to ancient traditions going back 1,000 years. This weaponry is marketed as a way to pledge allegiance to the group, its authenticity tying the purchaser into a history and supposed future of defending Christendom. The description for the battle helmet reads, "This incredible piece of history can be yours to hand down father to son until the call to arms comes again all across Christendom to rise and free our lands. You may need Kevlar next time though, but still, the Templar Knight helmet is a great icon for all true warriors." Though many of them survived into the early modern period, and some are still even with us today, the military orders are remembered primarily as institutions of the Middle Ages, an era that holds a strong fascination for the far right. We can see this in the OMC's novel, which opens with a 2-part historical overview of how Europe has fallen from supposed unity in the medieval period into division and godlessness following the French Revolution. The first part, titled "Who Were the Christian Soldiers?", presents a highly idealised image of a unified and Catholic medieval Europe. If clergy were found to be committing crimes or preaching heresy, then they were swiftly removed from the priesthood. If a crusade or holy league were called to defend Christendom, then all soldiers joined. This prologue's second part, how were the Christian soldiers turned into secular soldiers, presents this unity as being destroyed by the secularists behind the French Revolution. The author claims that it was at this time the Masonic slogan of liberty, equality, fraternity was born, and that Bastille Day heralded the introduction of all modern problems when governments took God out of everything, including the proper training for soldiers. The 7 soldiers that the novel focuses on are armed with special crusader swords made out of damascene steel, as the originals were, and they use longbows to kill ISIS snipers. When defending Mosul, the soldiers build trebuchets with electric winches to increase the speed of reloading. The author writes that our blessed Lord tasks them to defend this city, using any and all means to do that, modern weapons and medieval weapons. When one character in the novel, Bolesław, becomes King of Poland, he returns the Polish Church to a state before the Vatican II reforms. Things perceived by the far right as modern social ills are banned: abortion, contraception, same-sex marriage, euthanasia and pornography. All the liberal mayors of Warsaw and other towns are removed and exiled. Socialism is banned, Islam and the Quran are outlawed, the death penalty is restored, and the country leaves the European Union. Thus, Bolesław restores Poland to what the author sees as its ideal state, his interpretation of a society medieval in culture, politics, and religion. When the people of Europe then call for the return of their kings, God appears to Bolesław, promising him that Christendom will be restored, bringing Europe back to the idealised medieval period that the author presents in the novel's prologue. The OMC's founder also idolises the Middle Ages. In a 2016 interview, he even went so far as to say of the medieval period that "I wish it would come back." He has called medieval Europe a beautiful society and has said that for him, the whole spirit of our company is the Crusades and what the Crusaders did defending Christians. Far-right forums such as Stormfront regularly host discussions about how the medieval period was actually one of great progress and light, when the white man was encouraged to research war, history, alchemy, literature, obedience, and leadership. The neo-Nazi renegade Tribune sees the medieval period as an immensely creative time, a transition when the religious enslavement of our people was still uncertain, an industrial revolution. For the BNP, the medieval period and the Crusades are a noble example of an earlier population responding to hundreds of years of savage and unprovoked relentless attacks by rallying under the banner of the cross to defend themselves and fight back. The medieval period appeals to the far right as a time when all the aspects of the modern world that they opposed were supposedly absent. And the Templars may hold a special appeal in that they did not survive the Middle Ages, and so the far right sees them as being untainted by modern history. Another factor in the choice of the Templars over other military orders must also be their fame, especially compared to some of the more minor orders. People cannot appropriate history that they are not aware of, and smaller military orders like the Hospital of St. Thomas of Acre and the Order of St. Lazarus are not very widely known outside academia. The Templars also had a history in England, and so would appeal to these American and British groups. As nationalists, they are probably less keen on European orders, like the Teutonic Knights or the Knights of Santiago, because of their foreign nature. The Hospitallers may very well be dismissed because their name sounds less martial than the Knights Templar. Another not insignificant factor is that the Templars, unlike the Hospitallers and Teutonic Knights, have no modern successor who could sue them for bringing their order's image into disrepute. The modern Hospitaller orders, such as the Catholic Order of Malta and the Anglican Venerable Order of St. John, to name the 2 largest, have a joint committee to monitor and prosecute imitation orders. In contrast, people can adopt the memory of the Templars quite freely, and a multitude of books, documentaries, films, and video games have been produced about the Knights Templar or contain groups modelled upon them. Kingdom of Heaven, the most recent Hollywood epic featuring the Templars, is often used online, with clips and stills appearing in far-right memes and websites. Video game series like Assassin's Creed, Crusader Kings, and Dragon Age each feature Templars or groups based upon them. In comics, Azrael, a Batman villain, is part of the Order of Saint Dumas, a fictional Templar splinter group. A 1998 Batman comic even has him investigate Rosslyn Chapel and its supposed Templar links. Even science fiction has taken inspiration from the Templars. In early drafts of the script for Star Wars, George Lucas considered calling his suppressed order of warrior monks the Jedi Templars. The role of pop culture is particularly important, as these imitation military orders are deeply rooted in and inspired by popular perceptions of history. The Knights Templar Order International is so influenced by pop culture depictions of the Templars that their governing body is named the Grand Rosslyn Priory, a reference to Rosslyn Chapel, a church repeatedly linked without any evidence whatsoever to the Templars, most famously in Dan Brown's novel The Da Vinci Code. The group repeatedly use images from films featuring Crusaders or Templars, such as Ironclad and Kingdom of Heaven. And as I showed earlier, they also draw upon the latter film as the source of their Templar oath. The OMC has also used imagery from Ironclad, as well as from popular video game series featuring the Templars or Templar-like groups, including Assassin's Creed and the Elder Scrolls. Pop culture depictions of medieval past and of medievalist fantasy play a major role in both inspiring these groups and in their attempts to garner support. The Knights Templar Order International's use of Rosslyn Chapel leads on to the final aspect of my talk tonight. The fame of the Templars and their popularity with the far right is also in part due to the endless deluge of pseudo-historical books that promise to reveal the secrets of the Templars. By pseudo-histories, I'm referring to books, theories and stories about the past that at least try to wear a cloak of respectability. They can be found in every bookshop's history section, promising to reveal the secret or true history of the Templars. They are not blatantly untrue works, so no one who reads Baphomet's Meteor, a novel in which an alien helps the Knights Templar to conquer the world, will come away thinking that they've read a true story. Likewise, the theories of James Tiburon, an Arkansas engineer who claimed to channel the archangel and voice of God, Metatron. He believed that the Templars made use of mystical global force fields called reshals. But when a book like the Da Vinci Code is peppered with references to real artworks, artifacts, people and places, and without the absurd fantasies of alien force fields, readers do sometimes believe that elements of the story were true, and not helped by the author sometimes saying as much in interviews. Sure, the novel's hero, Robert Langdon, is fictional, but what about all the artworks? They are real, so maybe the conspiracy of symbols linking them is too. At first, some may wonder what is so bad about writing pseudo-histories of the Templars. Of course, people accept that to write inaccurate accounts of the Holocaust or other genocides is deeply wrong. The horrors of those events need to be properly recorded and understood. But why should we care about someone writing that a group of knights 700 years ago secretly escaped to America, or that their battle flag is the origin of the skull and crossbones symbol? For one thing, these theories are often not so far removed as one might expect from the darker pseudo-histories that we find about the Holocaust. Some theories are actually quite directly linked, like that promoted by Anthony Cooper, co-author of William Wallace' Robin Hood Revealed. While his book does not mention the Templars, it is an excellent example of pseudo-history, full of great logical leaps and shaky interpretations of evidence. Readers of his Robin Hood Revealed may then choose to look up Anthony Cooper online, and so come across his essay for henrymakow.com, in which he claims that William Wallace, who he argues to be the origin of Robin Hood legend, fought against a conspiracy of the English, the Templars, and Kabbalist Jews. The website hosting this essay also carries articles on the Rothschild family and a Jewish New World Order, both common anti-Semitic tropes. Templar pseudo-histories are not always as distant from the anti-Semitism of Holocaust revisionists as one might first expect. Two common Templar myths particularly lend themselves to far-right conspiracy theories. One deals with their supposed links with Judaism, the other with a supposed survival after 1312. Many Templar pseudo-histories claim that the Order's founders were descended from a group of Jewish elders who escaped the destruction of Jerusalem's Second Temple by the Romans in AD 70. Supposedly these elders hid the temple's treasures and a selection of esoteric writings before fleeing the city for Europe, where their descendants eventually became medieval Europe's leading families and then the founding Templars. Other theories claim that the Templars absorbed mystical Jewish teachings or mathematics discovered in the Holy Land. As we can see here, users on the far-right forum Stormfront directly reference these ideas, incorporating them into anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. One user says, "The story goes that the Jews learned the Kabbalah in their Babylonian exile days, and then the Templars learned it in Jerusalem during the Crusades." Another says that the Templars and the Jews worked together and they gave the Jews protection, and even claims that they were part of a blood libel, the baseless accusation of Jewish ritual murder of children. Here we can see two more users discussing similar myths of the Templars being seduced with Kabbalistic intrigue and being Knights of the Jewish Temple. These myths about the Templars' Jewish ties, when combined with stories about their links to Freemasonry or the Illuminati and their secret survival today, prime audiences for older anti-Semitic conspiracies about secret Jewish control of society. Pseudo-histories are not written in a vacuum, and their authors must be very short-sighted indeed if they do not see how myths of secret Jewish origins for the Templars can be used by the far right. Myths about the after-history of the Templars, probably the most popular genre of Templar pseudo-histories, can also lend themselves to far-right appropriation. One myth is that the Templars escaped to the Americas, in some versions led by Henry Sinclair, Earl of Orkney and grandfather of the builder of Rosslyn Chapel. The exact location in which the Templars supposedly settled varies, but generally these theories centre on New England. The evidence cited in support of this is sparse, even by the standards of most Templar pseudo-histories. These theories claim that the building we can see here, Newport Tower in Rhode Island, was built by the Templars as a fortification. It's actually just the base of a 17th century windmill. The second main artefact that is often cited in support of this theory is the Westford Knight in Massachusetts, a natural rock pattern which apparently shows the image of a medieval knight. I should point out that the vague outline of a shield you can see in white here was actually painted on at a later date. There are also unevidenced assertions that Native American folklore from the Northeast records encounters with Europeans who may have been Templars. But this very weak evidence is less important than how this myth fits into a wider tradition of fabricating a white pre-Columbian history in the Americas. North American white supremacists have often promoted such myths in an attempt to create a longer history on the continent and to delegitimize indigenous histories. The brief Norse settlement of Vinland is often used by the far right in this vein. In 2001, the white supremacist Sigurdrifa publications, named after a Valkyrie in the Norse Poetic Edda, even produced an information pack to promote Leif Erikson Day, named for the supposed founder of Vinland colony. The group called it "the day we celebrate his contributions to our culture and heritage." Today, the continuing appeal of the Vinland story to the far right is demonstrated by the existence of groups such as the Wolves of Vinland or the Vinlanders Social Club, and the use by white supremacists of a green, black and white flag called the Vinland flag. The Vinland story was also used by Jeremy Christian, who murdered 2 men in Portland, Oregon in 2017. Some weeks earlier, he posted on Facebook, "Hail Vinland, hail victory." We can also see here two different users on Stormfront post a poem and a national anthem about the Norse colony, recalling much the same themes as the Ku Klux Klan poem about the Crusaders that we saw at the beginning of this talk. Other stories of European settlement, like the debunked Solutrean hypothesis, a theory that people from what is now Iberia crossed to America 20,000 years ago, have also been adopted by the far right, as seen in this meme, using a still from the documentary Ice Age Columbus. This documentary presented the Solutreans as white, even though in fact they would have been dark-skinned. White supremacists claim that the Solutreans were peaceful and that they reached America before the ancestors of Native Americans, who then wiped out the Solutreans. By spreading this myth, they attempt to recast the genocide and colonization of European settlers after 1492 as a historical retribution for what happened, supposedly, to the Solutreans. These ideas of a white pre-Columbian history of America hold a strong appeal for white supremacists, and myths about Templar settlement in America easily fit within this genre. We can see here screenshots from more Stormfront users discussing these stories of the Templars in America with enthusiasm, and as an example of how white people had been in the Americas long before 1492, including the Phoenicians, Vikings, and Egyptians, supposedly. In this post at the bottom here from 2009, a user repeats the notes that they made while watching a pseudo-historical documentary about the Templars in America, going on to cite almost every Templar myth there is. In this post from 2015, the same user presents the Templar presence in America as fact, one that only willful blindness can deny. And as you can see, the user mentions the Templars discovering Jewish treasure, their fleet disappearing before the Order's arrest, that they were linked to Henry Sinclair and Rosslyn Chapel, as well as Columbus, the Westford Knights, and the Northport Tower. These are all classic myths about the Templars, repeated in a multitude of pseudo-historical books and documentaries. Their adoption by this user shows that promoting ludicrous stories of Templars in America is not just harmless pseudo-history written in a vacuum. Instead, it provides more fuel for white supremacist myth-making. The far right's fascination with the Crusades, and the Templars in particular, is widespread, draws upon a long history, and shows no sign of abating. The OMC plans to release 2 further books, one of which is intended to, as the author puts it, reclaim the Knights Templar for Holy Mother Church. And the Knights Templar Order International has just released a book titled Deus Vult, Reconquista of the West. The explosion in Templar interest over the last few decades follows the boom in Templar pseudo-histories that began with Bajan, Lee, and Lincoln's Holy Blood, Holy Grail. It may be tempting to dismiss such works as harmless fantasy, but as I've shown tonight, we can trace direct links between these theories and the far right, whether it is the Knights Templar Order International adopting the name of Rosslyn Chapel for their headquarters, or Stormfront users turning Templar mythology to their own racist and anti-Semitic ends. Even if a pseudo-history does not promote these anti-Semitic theories of secret Jewish origins for the Templars, or create a fake pre-Columbian white past for modern America, by constantly presenting real history as something that historians have covered up, the authors of these works still weaken trust in history and in historians. If they cover up the truth about the Templars, what else might they be hiding? Again, this can eventually lead readers to darker pseudo-histories and conspiracy theories like Holocaust revisionism. Historians should not just dismiss these pseudo-histories, but we should work to actively push back against them. Thank you.